35 interesting, clear facts about the life and work of Aristotle. Birthplace and date. Aristotle was born in 384 BCE in Stagirus, a Greek city on the Chalcidius Peninsula in northern Greece. Family background. His father, Nicomachus, was the court physician to the Macedonian royal house. This medical family background influenced Aristotle's lifelong interest in biology and the natural world. Macedonian connection. Because of his father's service to Macedon, Aristotle had early links with Macedonian elites, connections that later made him tutor to Alexander the Great. Moved to Athens at about 17 years old, Aristotle moved to Athens to study at Plato's academy, where he remained for roughly 20 years. Student of Plato. Aristotle was a devoted student of Plato for about 2 decades, but he developed major disagreements with Plato's theory of forms and became an independent thinker. Differences with Plato. Whereas Plato emphasized abstract forms as primary reality, Aristotle argued that forms exist in individual things and must be studied through their material instances. This is a core split between them. Work after Plato's death. After Plato died, Aristotle left the academy, partly because Plato's nephew Speusippus took over leadership and spent time traveling and studying elsewhere. Tutoring Alexander the Great. Around 343 BCE, Aristotle was summoned by King Philip II of Macedon to tutor his son Alexander, the future Alexander the Great. Aristotle taught him for several years and is said to have influenced Alexander's early education and love of science and observation. Founding the Lyceum. In 335 BCE, Aristotle returned to Athens and founded his own school, the Lyceum, which combined teaching, research, and a large library and collection. Peripatetic walking teaching style. The Lyceum's name, peripatetic, likely refers to Aristotle and his students walking around the covered walkways while discussing philosophy and science. Aristotle favored conversational, field-informed teaching. Role of the Lyceum Library. The Lyceum kept extensive notes and a library of specimens and texts. Aristotle and his school systematically collected data from nature, making the Lyceum an early research institute. The corpus, lecture notes versus polished books. Much of what survives of Aristotle's writings are lecture notes and research drafts intended for students, not polished books for public reading. This explains their technical and sometimes fragmentary tone. The Organon, formal logic. Aristotle created the first systematic treatment of logic, later compiled as the Organon. He developed syllogistic reasoning, laying the foundations for formal logic for centuries. Four causes theory. Aristotle introduced the doctrine of four causes, material, formal, efficient, and final, as a way to explain why things are the way they are. Final cause is central to his biology and teleology. Founder of empirical biology. Aristotle is often called the first systematic biologist. He examined, described, and classified hundreds of animals, combining observation with theorizing. Dissections and fieldwork. He performed dissections, examined marine life at the Aegean seashores, and organized empirical observations, practices rare among philosophers of his time. Classification efforts. Aristotle produced early schemes for classifying animals, an ancestor of later taxonomy. Ethics, virtue as a mean. In ethics, Aristotle argued that moral virtue is a mean between extremes, emphasizing character and habituation. Practical and theoretical division. He divided knowledge into theoretical, productive, and practical domains, each with its own methods and goals. Politics and the polis. In politics, Aristotle analyzed constitutions empirically and argued that the polis exists to achieve the good life. He studied many Greek constitutions to derive principles of governance. Poetics, tragedy, and mimesis. In the Poetics, Aristotle offered the earliest surviving systematic analysis of literary theory, defining tragedy, catharsis, plot structure, and the role of imitation. Rhetoric as a craft. Aristotle's rhetoric framed persuasive speech as a discipline with methods and practical rules, a work that shaped later rhetoric and oratory. Metaphysics, study of first philosophy. The works later called Metaphysics examine being as being and first causes. The term metaphysics arose from the placement of these works after his physical treatises, but the content addresses fundamental ontology. Concept of the unmoved mover. Aristotle proposed an unmoved mover, a final cause that moves the cosmos by being the object of desire or thought, not by physical pushing, an influential idea in later theology and philosophy. Scientific method elements. While not identical to modern experimental method, Aristotle emphasized observation, classification, and reasoning from particulars to general principles, an important step toward empirical science. Large and diverse interests. Aristotle wrote on an extraordinary range of subjects: logic, metaphysics, ethics, politics, biology, zoology, physics, rhetoric, poetics, meteorology, and psychology, practically a full encyclopedia of ancient knowledge. Influence during the Middle Ages. After antiquity, Aristotle's works, especially as interpreted by Islamic philosophers like Avicenna and Averroes, became central to medieval scholasticism and dominated European intellectual life for centuries. Transmission through Arabic world. Many of Aristotle's works were preserved, commented on, and transmitted via translations into Arabic, which later re-entered Europe and sparked a revival of Aristotelian studies in the Latin West. Loss and rediscovery of texts. Several of Aristotle's works were lost or survived only in fragments. What we have is a portion of his original output, often reconstructed from quotations and manuscript traditions. Students and successors. Aristotle trained many students who continued the peripatetic tradition. Theophrastus, his immediate successor at the Lyceum, extended Aristotle's botanical and biological work. Exile and death. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, anti-Macedonian feeling in Athens made Aristotle vulnerable. Accused of impiety, he left for Chalcis and died there in 322 BCE. Personal life and family. Aristotle married Pythias and later had a long relationship with Hercules of Stagira, by whom he had a son, Nicomachus. The son's name later gave the title to Nicomachean Ethics. Teaching style recorded in notes. The surviving works show practical classroom concerns, questions, proofs, and sketches, so his teaching was interactive, empirical, and aimed at training investigators. Language and coinage. Aristotle wrote in a clear, technical Attic Greek that introduced many philosophical distinctions and terms. His conceptual vocabulary shaped subsequent philosophical discourse. Enduring legacy and limits. Aristotle's methods and categories dominated natural science and philosophy for 2 millennia. At the same time, some of his specific scientific claims were later overturned. Yet his systematic approach and insistence on observation remained a cornerstone of Western thought.